So blessed to be with you this evening and welcoming into the program one of our frequent guests that we've come to know and trust and respect, Will Hild. He's coming to us as Executive Director of Consumers Research. The website is consumerresearch.org, consumersresearch.org. Will, thanks for coming on.
It's great to be with you. Always is.
I'm glad you're back. We have so much to discuss. When I saw this news earlier in the week, I thought, oh, yeah, this is really great. And, you know, no one had to protest or burn down major cities to get this done. This was actually good activism coupled with a policy that just couldn't be worked out within our banking industry. So we have a diminishing net zero banking alliance. And for those who are listening in the program tonight who maybe don't know what net zero banking alliance is, talk to us about this.
Well, basically, it was a banking cartel of the largest banks here in the United States and internationally who had all gotten together and agreed to use their loan portfolios, meaning the access that they gatekeep to financing, to push net zero across every industry in our economy, from airlines to concrete to manufacturing to energy generation. Basically, they were saying that if you want to get a loan, as often corporations need, $100 million, billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar loans, that banks like JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Goldman, we're going to say, we are all agreeing, we're colluding with each other to block access to that financing unless these companies and these industries agree to net zero. So the departure of the largest banks in America from this agreement, from this cartel, should be music to the ears of every consumer who hears it.
Oh, and just thousands of people across the land breathe a sigh of relief because not enough Americans even know this was going on. I do believe more Americans would have been protesting and calling their banks and asking why they were even engaging in this, but most Americans weren't even aware it was happening.
That's right, and it sort of flew. I guess the better way to put it is it hid in plain sight. This is a United Nations program headed by billionaire Mike Bloomberg. It was, put into effect during the Obama administration, or put in place during the Obama administration. And despite the fact that it's a UN program, it's still a violation of basic antitrust law here in the United States. You are not allowed to use your market share, and you certainly are not allowed to collude amongst your competitors to use your market share to control the supply of a good or service in the United States. And I actually think that's part of the reason you've seen such a rapid departure, and that is because Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, and 12 other states just launched a lawsuit in November, the day before Thanksgiving. They sued the members of a different net zero alliance, Net Zero Asset Managers, and I think the banks are trying to get ahead of getting sued themselves. And I think that explains a lot of the rapid departures you've seen recently.
So for the banks that don't depart, and if they're sued, are they in danger of actually having damages leveled against them?
Absolutely. Now, at this point, it'll be a little bit harder to sue them because, it'll be a little bit harder to sue them because there are really no American banks left in this alliance. JP Morgan Chase, which was the last American member, left earlier this week. So the only ones left are now international banks in Europe and Canada who don't do as much lending here in the United States and may not be subject to the same, Sherman Antitrust Act jurisdiction that these American banks were. But the good news is, even with maybe international, foreign banks still part of this thing, most of the international banking system is based here in the United States. So once you have the big banks here, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, BOA, leaving, that's really the whole match. And in some ways, you want our international competitors to stay part of this insane cartel because that means they're giving up business to domestic banks here who have finally come to their senses. So it's sort of good news all around. We want our American banks out of this. We want our industries here in the United States to be able to get financing without taking on these insane, costly, inflation-inducing net zero pledges and goals. But at the same time, if the rest of the world wants to continue shooting themselves in the foot, I'll take it. So I would admonish any bank that's a part of this to leave. But even the current situation is sort of the best of both worlds from a America First perspective, because I would rather our banks, even as naughty as they've been, I'd rather our banks get the business that they can now get instead of banks like Royal Bank of Canada.
Wow. So I agree with you. I do have an affinity for American companies, and I want them to be ahead and, be at the tip of the spear. And even though they have been really awful, the reversal, of course, means that we can, we'll just kind of dust our hands off and move on. But there really is a serious sit down that has to be had amongst those who act as if votes don't matter, as if elections don't matter. This is an unbelievable turn of events. All of these things like dominoes falling after learning that President Trump is coming back to D.C. It's just astounding, the changes that are underway. And all of it seems to be predicated on his return. Like if it was a Harris return, I don't think the Net Zero Alliance would be falling.
I do think that played a significant role, and I will say I think it was a 1-2 punch from what happened in November, the election of Donald Trump and his return of his administration, and also this lawsuit, this antitrust lawsuit from the coalition of about a dozen states led by Attorney General Ken Paxton. The combination of those two things told the banks and now the asset managers, listen, you've been used to getting it from the states, and that is increasing in volume and intensity. I don't think they saw this lawsuit from Ken Paxton coming. I don't think they thought they would be called out for the antitrust activity in that way. But then you have, hey, the feds aren't going to be helping you. They're going to be going the other way. Andrew Ferguson, President Trump's stated nominee to chair the Federal Trade Commission that's in charge of enforcing at the federal level antitrust law or going after companies who are engaged in antitrust practices, basically already was, quoted saying all kinds of things that led one to believe he would be looking very, very suspiciously at these net zero alliance agreements and treating them as cartels. So I think you're 100% right. I think it was a 1-2 punch of what was coming out of the states, and then also this oncoming 18-wheeler coming right at them of the Trump administration and the incoming FTC chair, Andrew Ferguson.
So that is so good. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things you'd like to see in the upcoming Trump administration as it pertains, because this is your area of expertise. What would you like to see?
Well, in addition to being excited about a new FTC that takes antitrust enforcement against these cartels seriously, not just banking, but also with asset management and insurance, I'm really excited to see an SEC that's actually going to start enforcing the law against a lot of these asset managers who just haven't been following the basics of what they're supposed to be focused on. They're supposed to be focused on returns for their consumers. They're supposed to be honest in their marketing materials, often called their prospectuses for their funds. They're supposed to be honest about what they're doing when they make these investments, and they haven't been. They've been lying to their customers. They've been saying in the marketing materials that they focus just on returns and making money for the client, but then they've been going and promising third parties like the net zero asset managers that they would use everyone's money that they manage, all assets under management, not just funds that have ESG in the name or sustainable in the name. But, when you give money to the BlackRock S&P 500 index fund, the most vanilla type of investment funds that they offer, they were using that money to push a net zero objective. That's securities fraud. And I can say that without worrying about getting sued, because they've been accused of that at the state level by elected officials, namely in Mississippi and Indiana. The secretaries of state there have come to an administrative finding that BlackRock was engaging in securities fraud in the way they were marketing this. Now, obviously, I didn't expect that we were going to get anything out of SEC Chair Gensler in the form of enforcing these kind of basic fraud statutes. But I am very hopeful that incoming SEC Chair Paul Atkins will take this very seriously. I know that he's a person who takes those types of issues much more seriously than Gensler did. So between the FTC and the SEC, and if you want the real wonky one from an agency you've never heard of before, there's another agency called the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. It was set up in the 70s, and its job was to try to prevent too much concentrated control of public utilities, the companies that generate our electricity and keep our lights on in the country. And one of their rules is that you can only own up to a certain amount of a percentage of a publicly traded utility before you need permission from FERC, from the commission, to continue to own that much, because they're worried about too much concentrated interest when they were set up in the 70s. And BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard are all well above that threshold. And they have to get a waiver every 3 years to continue owning it. And their excuse was always, listen, we're just passive. We're passive fund managers. We don't do anything. Well, this is a flat out lie. Because of their involvement with net zero asset managers and the targets that they set, they agreed and then followed through on those agreements to push these publicly traded utilities to do things like set early retirement dates for every coal and natural gas powered plant that they own. That's the opposite of passive. There's no more micromanaging a public utility than to try and tell them what they need to do with individual power plants. And so FERC has already started to look increasingly suspicious, even under a Democratic majority. And under a Republican majority, I think that they are in a lot of trouble, and they're going to start losing these waiver requests, which means they're going to have to divest of some of these companies, and that is going to wreck their business, because a lot of these publicly traded utilities are part of these indexes that they are required to own. So I don't even know what they're going to do in that. But I am giddy at the prospect of them being in the vice of not getting these waivers because of how bad they've been.
Wow. You brought the receipts against them. They can't actually withstand that kind of scrutiny. And with the Republican president, Republican legislature, and then, of course, can we just go ahead and admit, DOGE is also going to be looking into these kinds of things, right? Anything that impacts energy, anything that's dragging down what American consumers have to pay. This is so important.
No, you're 100% right, and I'll just note that Vivek Ramaswamy, who's going to be assisting Elon Musk with DOGE, he really came onto the scene actually on this issue, on the issue of ESG. He wrote a book called Woke Incorporated that helped articulate this for the average person to understand how they were being mistreated by the financial services industry and the asset managers in specific. So I know this is a bread and butter issue. When he ran for office, obviously he had to broaden his appeal, and so he kind of dropped that as his main issue so he didn't get pigeonholed. But this is something that he understands very well, and I expect he's going to take some pretty aggressive actions through DOGE on these people. So yeah, that's a great point. I'm very excited about DOGE and Vivek's activities on that.
Oh, it's going to be so great. It's going to be one of the very best opportunities that we can ever get our hands on. This is just, it's just fantastic. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. I'm a little overexcited because I feel like you and I have had conversations before about how dangerous these things are. To see it come to an end, it's great work on the part of Ken Paxton and everyone who's been involved, your organization, and it just feels good to have some good news to report.
100%. Now, I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture because these people have not had a sincere change of heart. They are only being, actually, to paraphrase Larry Fink, they are only changing because they are being forced to change, right? He had that infamous quote where he says, at BlackRock, we are forcing behaviors to change. And so we are going to have to stay on them. Consumers Research is going to stay on them, and we're going to continue to help attorney generals from across the country and governors and even the federal government to push back on this. And we need to chisel out all of ESG, not just the net zero pledges and the way the inflationary effects it's having on consumers, but also the race and sex-based quotas that BlackRock helped put in place in a lot of these corporations, pushing this DEI nonsense, anti-white, anti-male race of discrimination in hiring and promotion. So it's going to be a long fight, but the momentum has absolutely shifted. They are running scared, and we need to keep the pressure on So it's a little bit like being halfway through a regime of antibiotics. You get sick, you go to the doctor, he's prescribed you antibiotics. Take a pill a day for 20 days. You get 10 days in, you're feeling better. The symptoms are receding. You're out of bed. You're back to taking care of the kids, but you have to take the final 10 pills. You've still got the infection. You have to fight it all the way through. And that's where we are today. With the symptoms are receding, we're feeling better, but we have to keep our eye on the ball and get back to where we started at square one and not let the left get a even partial victory on these ESG issues.
It's a really good analogy. That's something we can all understand. I mean, who doesn't love that when you first realize, oh my gosh, these antibiotics are working, and you start to feel like a human being again. You can get up, you can actually move around, the pain goes away. And that's when you have to be very, very careful. You have to be vigilant and actually finish off your bottle. You have to finish it off so that you don't fall ill again. And then, of course, when it comes roaring back, you have to go harder at it, and you can be sick for longer. And so it's complicated, and we don't want that. I'm so glad we could talk about this and unpack the details here. I want to tell everyone just one more time, you can learn all about this and keep up with these important issues by going to consumersresearch.org, Will Hild, Happy New Year. Congratulations.
Happy New Year, Stacy. Thanks for having me on to talk about these issues, and I look forward to hopefully coming back on and having even more good news to report in 2025. It's going to be a great year. We're going to make a lot of progress. And thank you so much for having me on to talk about some of it.
I love it. We'll have you back. We'll continue the conversation. We'll continue informing our listeners here at Sirius. Thank you, Will. Have a fantastic evening and weekend. We'll be right back with more. 866-957-2874 to talk to me. We'll be right back.